Not too long ago, I had the opportunity to go, when I returned from the wedding of my son in Israel, I stopped off at Kiev. And there, with my other son, we went on a journey, and this driver took us to the various graves of the holy people who lived at that time. Being the grandfather, if you will, of Jewish Renewal, my job has been also to bring about an understanding of Hasidism in a new way. So being at the grave of the Ba'al Shem Tov, when you come to the grave of a holy person, you want to make yourself very receptive to the vibrations that come from there. And I wanted to be able to graft this Hasidism that we have onto the tree of the Ba'al Shem Tov. And it came to me that the Ba'al Shem Tov was saying, every once in a while, people forget that God sends down loving influence, life into the world, and the people who are in charge of a religion want to dam it up. So they had dammed it up so much so that most of the simple people who needed access to the divine juice, if you will, couldn't do that anymore because they had dammed it up. So the Ba'al Shem Tov said, so what did I do? I dug underneath the dam to allow for that thing to flow again.
I actually can't believe that I'm soon going to be sitting on a plane on my way to Kiev, to Ukraine, to embark on this journey to meet all of these figures, the Ba'al Shem Tov and all of his spiritual and physical descendants. You know, we've met with Rabbi Zalman and we've planned this journey, and for me, as someone who used to be an actor in England and then discovered Hasidic storytelling, especially the stories of the Ba'al Shem Tov, which kind of brought me into what I do now, into being a rabbi and just the spirituality of those stories, and now actually going to be meeting them. It's very, very exciting.
So I wish you a good trip. It's going to be very exciting.
It's amazing to be in Kiev at this time of the year. Spring and blossoming chestnut trees. The great gates of Kiev are just behind of me, but not so far from here. Once, 11 centuries ago, there were Jewish gates of Kiev, which tells us it was quite a big Jewish population of Kiev in 10th century.
In Kiev, I reconnected with my old friend, Rabbi Alexander Dukhovny, with whom I had gone to rabbinical school in the UK and who was now the chief progressive rabbi of Kiev and Ukraine.
In my childhood, I knew that my Hasidic-born grandfather from my mother's side was the last rabbi of Russia who was killed by Nazis in 1943. And I'm going to be the first Ukrainian-born rabbi studying abroad and coming back to Ukraine, serving Ukrainian Jewry. It was another challenge for me, and this is why, with this famous surname Dukhovny, which in translation into English means spiritual, for me was even double a challenge, because this what the role of the rabbi is. And I think this what Hasidism, when it started, was thinking about, to bring the ideas of spirituality back to Ukrainian Jewry or Galician Jews who were illiterate, who knew very little about Judaism, but who would like to remain Jewish.
And the driver, Yuri.
Yuri, right, yeah, we're looking forward to meeting him.
And he came, for me, he came there with a sign waiting for me. And then he put us into his van, and we traveled.
In Kiev, we met up with our faithful driver, Yuri, who had been recommended to us by Reb Zalman, as he'd been his driver on a trip a few years earlier. Yuri is a former pilot who now makes most of his living driving people around the Ukraine to all of the graves of the Hasidim. More than a driver, he was our guide throughout the whole journey.
Where did you go first?
First to the Ba'al Shem.
Ah, okay. So I think we're gonna go to Uman first. So we are here in Uman and we are about to go into the Tzion, into Rabbi Nachman's grave here where he was buried. He spent his last few years here and he said that people should come and see him, especially on Rosh Hashanah, and come and be with him and pray with him. And so it's a real holy pilgrimage site. Rabbi Nachman was the great-grandson of the Ba'al Shem Tov, and he was a very, very holy spiritual master and an amazing storyteller. There are stories that he used to tell and stories that are told about him. And he used to say, you know, stories, people tell stories to send you to sleep. Stories are to wake you up. And his stories were really about waking up the soul to really experience the truth. And so many of the prayers that are said at his grave are about opening our hearts to serve in truth, to find our true way to be. So I believe the way in is here. It's Erev Shabbat, it's Friday afternoon, so some of these people are actually going to the mikveh, to the ritual immersion to prepare themselves for Shabbat.
The amazing thing about Rabbi Nachman is how he managed to inspire people who were struggling with life. He would say, "You must not despair. No matter what happens to you, know that God is always near. Whether you are in heaven or in hell, God is always with you."
So this is tzedakah, which is charity, and this says in Yiddish word kvitlich, a little petitionary notes, little prayers. And a couple of people back home have given me little notes that they wanted me specifically to put by Rabbi Nachman. I have two here. I'm not going to tell you who they're from. With little notes, I'm going to offer these kvitlich into the box. And this is some tzedakah. This is the biggest tradition of coming here and saying these particular psalms. The idea that all of our prayers are going to be somehow absorbed by the neshama, by the soul of Rabbi Nachman. But for tikkun klali, it's like a general repair of everything. So I'm going to carry on saying some of those psalms. איך נשיט שידוני על אדמתך תדבק לשוני לחיכים לא אזכרכי אם לא עלי את ירושלים על ראש שמחתי.
I'm a grandchild of Rabbi Nachman. He's my grandfather. This place is a very, very special place. When you feel some, sad, when you feel some not so good, I'm going on a plane, I'm flying to here, I'm sitting here a few days, and I feel much better. This place is very, very, very special place. You can pray here and ask whatever you want. After, when you came back home, you feel so good. We came here a few times in a year, and especially in Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, it's
lot of 30,000 people.
Here in the normally sleepy Ukrainian town of Uman in central Ukraine, an extraordinary festival is underway. Thousands of Jews from around the world have made the pilgrimage here to see the burial site of the legendary Rabbi Nahman of Bratzlav for Rosh Hashanah. Hasidic master Rabbi Nahman was a great-grandson of the founder of Hasidism, the Ba'al Shem Tov. The Rosh Hashanah pilgrimage dates back to 1811, the year after Nahman died, and Breslov Hasidim and other Jews have come every year since to ask forgiveness for their sins and celebrate the Holy New Year. After the collapse of communism in 1989, the number of Jews traveling to Uman dramatically increased, from 2,000 in 1990 to approaching 30,000 today.
We hope bekarov soon to see the Geula Shleima with Mashiach together. Have a good Shabbat.
Amen. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
So the Shabbat in Uman?
Shabbat in Uman. And this is Chuck. He's making this film. And this is Anthony. He's the cameraman. Usually behind the camera, now in front of the camera.
Mashiach didn't come yet in times of the Ba'al Shem Tov. He didn't take us home yet in times of Rabbeinu Nahman. We still anticipate, although it's getting late, 'cause Acharoin Acharoin.
Amazingly, while we were in the community house after Shabbat, we ran into Lipa Schmeltzer, possibly the most popular Hasidic singer in the world, known for his hip-hop style and comic videos.
I came in to eat. This is not a setup. I met this wonderful people from Colorado that are making a wonderful documentary. They asked me if I want to sing the song. I don't have my band, I don't have music. I just came for a spiritual trip to daven. I said, no problem. Maybe it can give a message to somebody who needs a little bit of spiritual belief. So, and the song, if I remember it correctly, goes like, I have just one responsibility, to do the best of my ability. I have just one responsibility, to do the best of my ability, and nothing more, 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 and nothing more. So you do the best of your ability, I do the best of my ability. You do the best of your ability, I do the best of my ability. You do the best of your ability, I do the best of my ability. You do the best of your ability, I do the best of my ability, and nothing more, and nothing more, and nothing more, and nothing more, and nothing more.
The Ba'al Shem Tov used to go for many, many mysterious journeys into the forest, and often at a moment's notice he would gather some of his Hasidim, some of his closest followers, and they would jump on the carriage and they would go on these long journeys, and somehow it would feel like the wheels of the carriage and the hooves of the horses weren't actually touching the ground on these journeys, because they were flying through the air, and time would stop and distances would be evaporated and they would reach their destination. And sometimes the destinations would have no real apparent reason, and yet there would always be something that needed to happen there, either something for the people that they encountered on the journey or for the Hasidim themselves who needed to learn something in that moment, in that place, on that carriage, with those horses at that particular time.
So we are in Bratzlav, the home of Rabbi Nachman for most of his life until he went to Uman at the end of his life. And here we are in the beautiful hills above the river where I imagine Rabbi Nachman used to go for mikveh, and near the woods where he would go for hitbodedut, to be alone in the forest and open his heart and cry out to God. And here we are walking towards the burial site of Rabbi Natan. Like his master, Reb Natan would inspire the Hasidim who were having tough times, saying, if someone wants to get closer to God, they need to know that obstacles will arise to trip them up, perhaps even causing them to fall from grace. But remember, nothing good is ever lost. No effort is ever wasted. With that foundation, you can always get up and start again. This is Heichal HaKohanim. This is a special place for the Kohanim who don't want to go to the actual gravesite to go. And here are a bunch of other gravestones, some of them looking very old. Ish Tam v'Yashar, a simple and straightforward man. Natan bar Yecheskel, Natan son of Yecheskel. It's relatively recent, it's 1912. So it's not our Rabbi Natan here, but someone with the name Natan. And so the word ohel actually means a tent, but it describes not the grave itself, but really the building that's built up around his tomb. So we're going to go in and see. Wow. So here we are walking into the ohel, into the building that houses these two graves. This one is Rabbi David Tzvi, and he was the grandson of Rabbi Natan, and this is Rabbi Natan's grave here. Po Niftar, here lies Rabbi Natan bar Rabbi Naftali, the son of Rabbi Naftali. And Rabbi Natan really carried a huge responsibility for carrying the legacy and the teaching of his spiritual teacher, Rabbi Nachman. And Rabbi Nachman, I told him he had to be an absolute expert in all of halakha, all of Jewish law, and from then he could expound on the law through the spiritual interpretations of the law that his teacher had taught him. And so a lot of the books up here are books of law. I think one of the most important stories that Rabbi Nachman used to tell was a story of the treasure under the bridge. He used to tell a story of a guy who lived probably in one of these little villages, the shtetl of the Ukraine, who lived in a very poor guy, lived in a very broken house, had nothing really, and one night he had this dream, and in his dream he saw the emperor's palace in Vienna, and in front of the palace was a bridge, and underneath the bridge was a huge pot of treasure. So he woke up and he was like, yeah, it's just a dream. What am I going to do? Follow my dreams? No way. And then the next night he has the same dream. He sees the palace, he sees the bridge, he sees the treasure. No, that's just a dream. Then the third night he has the same dream. And he decides, maybe it's not just a dream after all. Maybe I need to follow the dream. So he sets off for this very long journey from wherever he was in the Ukraine to Vienna, taking very, very little with him, and he goes through the forests and journeys day and night and day. And eventually, after many, many days of travel, he gets to Vienna, and he sees the palace exactly as he'd seen it in his dream, and he sees the bridge exactly as he'd seen it in his dream, and he's also seeing something that he had not seen in his dream, which is the fact that the bridge and the palace are guarded day and night by these very burly-looking guards, officers of the emperor's army. And so he's just standing there not quite knowing what to do, and he's standing there for hours and hours, and eventually one of the officers comes over to him and he says, what are you doing? I've been watching you standing here. What are you doing? And so he decides to come clean, and he says, well, you know, I had this dream, and in my dream I saw this bridge, I saw this palace, and I saw a huge pot of treasure. The officer just laughs and laughs, and he says, you stupid Jew following your dreams. Where's that going to lead you? Where would I be if I followed my dreams? If I followed my dreams, I would be in Nowheresville, because I had a dream last night. I dreamed that if I went to some God-forsaken place in the middle of the Ukraine, and there was a broken house with broken doors, and I dreamt that I went into that house, and down in the cellar was a huge pot of treasure. Do you think I'm going to follow my dreams? And of course, this old Jewish man realizes that he is describing his village and his house. And he thanks the officer, and he sets back off on his long, long journey through the forest. And he gets back to his own house. He walks through his own broken door, and he goes down into his cellar, and there indeed he finds a huge pot of treasure. And Rabbi Nachman used to teach this story as being the fact that really each one of us has the treasure deeply inside us, and sometimes we have to go on long journeys to discover that treasure. Or sometimes, he used to say, we have to go and find the tzaddik, find the righteous one, find the rabbi, to help us find the treasure that's really buried deeply within ourselves. This place is the burial site of at least two very important Hasidim. The Maggid of Mezritch and Reb Zusha of Hanipol. So here in this ohel, in this room that's been created, we have two very important Hasidim here. These two guys. This is the Maggid of Mezritch. It says, Po niftar, here lies Harav HaMaggid mi Mezritch, Rabbeinu Dov ben Rabbi Avraham. And the Maggid of Mezritch was really the figure who, according to the legends, really took all of the Ba'al Shem Tov's teachings. He was his primary student, and he helped to disseminate them. And he had many, many Hasidim who each went off and
interpreted Hasidism in their own way and created all the different dynasties and lineages of Hasidim. But the Maggid of Mezritch was really the primary disciple of the Ba'al Shem Tov, and an important student of his was this guy, Reb Zusha of Hanipol, who was quite a character from the stories, and a very zealous, pious kind of soul who was just always bursting into tears at the wonder of it all. There's a beautiful story about how the Maggid of Mezritch first became a disciple of the Ba'al Shem Tov. He was a very learned man, very versed in all of the rabbinic texts. There's, you know, the Talmud, and also Kabbalah and the Zohar and everything. And he'd heard all of these rumors about this great man, the Ba'al Shem Tov, and wanted to kind of check him out.
So the Maggid of Mezritch, Dov Ber was his name, came to the Ba'al Shem Tov first in order to be healed. But he also wanted to find out, what does the Ba'al Shem Tov know? Because people said that he had such great awareness, such great deep knowledge. So the Ba'al Shem Tov said to him, do you know this particular text by Rabbi Isaac Luria, who was supposed to be the greatest Kabbalist that we ever had? And he says, yes, I know this one very well. So he says, would you please read it and explain it? And he did. The Ba'al Shem Tov shook his head. So he says, oh, you mean the other opinion? He gives him the other opinion. The Ba'al Shem Tov shook his head. So he says, if you know better, then tell me. He says, stand up. And he stood up. And the Ba'al Shem Tov began to recite the text, and all the realities that this text spoke about became palpably visible to him. When the Maggid of Mezritch heard and saw that, then he realized that this was a teacher of an altogether different level than one would expect, and he stayed with him.
And then there's a story told about when, just before the Ba'al Shem Tov died, and all of the Hasidim, all of the closest disciples of the Ba'al Shem Tov would say, well, who's going to be your successor? Who's going to take over after you're gone? And the Ba'al Shem Tov said, the person who can really understand the secret of pride and how to overcome pride. And so they asked around some of the Chevre, some of the Hasidim, and some of them asked the Maggid of Mezritch, Reb Dov Ber. They said, well, what's the secret of pride? And he said, pride belongs to God. As it says in the verse, Geut Lavesh, God is clothed, God is robed in pride. It's not for us to understand pride. All we can do is struggle with it, and struggle with it, and struggle with it all of our lives. And because of that answer, apparently everybody who was there at the time knew that this man who recognized that pride was something that we always have to overcome, he was the one who was going to take over the mantle and become the leader of the next generation.
It is early morning, on a beautiful morning here just outside the town of Berditchev, and we're in the Jewish cemetery just in front of the ohel here of Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berditchev, the Kedushat Levi, a very important Hasidic master, disciple, student of the Maggid of Mezritch. And we're standing here with Heschel, and Heschel very lovingly looks after this place and is one of just 250 Jews that still live in Berditchev. He was born in Berditchev in 1940, and at one time this was the second largest Jewish population in the whole region. There were 50,000 Jews here, and the whole town was rounded up, and 38,000 Jews were shot dead right here in Berditchev, and some of them remained. And Heschel, Boker Tov, good morning.
Boker Tov, good morning.
Heschel doesn't speak very much Hebrew or English. He speaks Yiddish and Russian, and I don't speak much Yiddish and Russian, so we're going to try and have a conversation. Sie sind jüdische
Mishpoche Jüdische.
Alle Mishpoche Jüdische. Alle mit geboren in Berditchev.
All of his family are Jewish. All his family were born here in Berditchev. Zayde is. Oh, his great grandfather davened, prayed with Rabbi Levi Yitzhak in his shul. One time there were 20 shuls, probably in 20 shul in Berditchev, yeah. 50,000 Jews lived here. In all of the... Vielen Dank. Shkoyach. Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berditchev, also known as the Kedushat Levi, was one of the most beloved of all the Hasidic Masters, known for his great compassion and for being able to find holiness in every person he met. Reb Levi Yitzhak was also known for his powerful, passionate, ecstatic prayers. He used to say, a person should pray as if they're on fire. But today, because our minds are so small and our sins are so big, we can't begin our prayers like that. Only after we've been praying for a long time will our words begin to spark and catch fire.
That tzaddikim. This grave is very, very different to the others that we've seen. There's a real simplicity to it. It hasn't been elaborately refurbished like some of the others that we've seen. And yet, there's a quality here that is quite intense with it. There's a lot of kvittlich, a lot of notes that people have left in their names for people. I can see some of these, like a whole list of names in Hebrew, probably names for healing, and then all of the candles around the outside. But the grave itself is quite stark and bare, and the only thing that indicates that this is actually Mordecai of Chernobyl is this handwritten piece of plastic written with a black pen that says Ponivta, here lies Harav Mordechai b'Chernobyl, Zichuto Tagein Aleinu Amen, may his merit protect us, Amen. And then it says Nifta in 1861, that he died in 1861.
Reb Mordecai of Chernobyl was a very regal personage who maintained a court like a king. He was known to say, the banquets and parties we have as Jews to celebrate our mitzvot, the commandments we must do, and the holidays we must observe, are worth more than the commandments themselves. For him, how you did something was more important than what you did. At his burial place in Gnatovka, we were fortunate to meet a local Ukrainian woman who looked after his grave, who was able to tell us a little bit of what was still remembered of Reb Mordechai.
We ask if she'd heard any stories about Mordechai of Chernobyl.
А може, знаєте якісь історії про Мordechai? Він був, який він був і так далі.
Мордехай Чернобыльский?
Да, Мордехай, да.
Он был предсказатель.
He was, you know, he was
У них
for a
было
seed.
4 брата.
It was
Отец
4
в
brothers.
Чернобыле, там, где взорвалась
His brother
атомная,
in
там
Chernobyl.
отца похоронили,
In Chernobyl.
оттуда. Их было 4 брата.
4
Они
brothers.
были по всей Украине.
It was big family living in all Ukraine.
И занимались своим делом. Но он был предсказатель, за ним было гонение.
He was can make forecast, you know, say what be after.
Oh, he could tell the
He
future.
look in the future, tell about the future, and they want to kill him for it.
Так он ехал сюда к нам, но тут он не доехал, а умер. И здесь его похоронили. Он здесь не жил.
He not live here, he just moved here and was died here. He was buried here.
So we are entering the forest. This forest is less than an hour away from Mezritch. Mezritch, the place where we're going to encounter the Ba'al Shem Tov. But who knows, maybe we're going to encounter him right here. Because so many of the Ba'al Shem Tov stories and the Hasidic stories in general take place in the forest.
There were two key stories for me. In Shivchei HaBesht and the classic legends of the Ba'al Shem Tov, there are two key stories. One is about the Ba'al Shem Tov as a child. He was an orphan and they sent him to Cheder, sent him to school, and every day they would find him missing from school, and they would have to look for him and they go out into the woods and find him alone with God, being alone with God in the woods instead of being in school. That is such a contrast to the typical East European biography of the future rabbi. By 10, he knew so much Talmud, nobody in the town could teach him. And by 12, he knew Gans Shas, the whole Talmud by heart, and so on. And this is somebody who didn't like book learning, but found God in the woods instead. Whether it's true or not, of course, as a legend, it's the Ba'al Shem Tov they wanted to present, the Ba'al Shem Tov who found God in the forests. And the other piece was very interesting to me. It said when the Ba'al Shem Tov first began to have his spiritual insights, he was like a crazy man. Haya medaber chutz lashita. He would speak in a crazy way. You couldn't get him, you couldn't understand him. And his heavenly teacher, Rabbi Arthur Green, who was the teacher of Elijah, came to him and taught him to say the first chapter in Psalms. Blessed are those of the simple path, Ashrei T'mimei Derech, over and over again, so he could come down from the heights and re-achieve simplicity, so he would be able to talk to people. Because when he was in that ecstatic state, he couldn't communicate, and he had to learn that his work was communicating with people. His work wasn't just his own ecstasy, his work was being able to say it in language that people could hear.
Some of the forests that the Ba'al Shem Tov entered, according to the tradition, is that the trees were so high that you couldn't even see their tops, and their trunks were so thick it would take 100 years to walk around them. So perhaps that forest was a forest more of the imagination. So we're now in the village of Mezritch, just very close to the cemetery, and this is the actual synagogue of the Ba'al Shem Tov. At least it's on the same site, and they've reconstructed it pretty much as it would have been. So let's go and look. Let's go and see what it's all about. Wow. So this actually says Beit HaMidrash, the study house, Ha'atik, the ancient study house, Shel HaBesht HaKodesh, the Holy Ba'al Shem Tov. Oh, wow. Oh, it's amazing. This is amazing. This is maybe in this very, very spot, the Ba'al Shem Tov and his other students would actually be leading the prayer services.
My grandfather, my father's father, was the last Mezritch Rebbe living in Mezritch, Grand Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Korff, and he was born in the Ba'al Shem Tov's house, which his father, Reb Mordecai, had inherited from his father, going back to Reb Baruchel.
There's something about the way in which they've reconstructed this that really creates an atmosphere. They've got the cast iron candle holders there. You can imagine the candles burning all hours of the night, and you can imagine the fervent study and prayer of the Hasidim and of the Ba'al Shem Tov. Just, you can see them. It's a powerful space. Yet again, I feel like, as I've said, you know, the Ba'al Shem Tov exists in, here we are searching for the Ba'al Shem Tov, searching all over the Ukraine for the Ba'al Shem Tov and the remnants of his descendants, his spiritual descendants, his physical descendants, but where do we really find the Ba'al Shem Tov? Perhaps inside our own hearts and inside our own imaginations, allowing us to connect to some force beyond ourselves that may or may not be the Ba'al Shem Tov. But I think it doesn't matter, there's just something very powerful.
One of the early stories that I remember being told was the Ba'al Shem Tov gave great respect to the Poshet Am, the simple people, people who didn't know anything at all. And it was the origin of the concept of the Hasidic Nigun, the wordless chant or the wordless tune. Because he was criticized by Misnagdim especially, but by others who were intelligent and educated. These Pashut people, why do you hang around with them? You know, what are they? They're nothing. They don't know anything. And the Ba'al Shem Tov said, but they can daven. They may not be able to open the Gemara or Talmud, but they can daven. And Misnagid would say, but they can't read Aleph Beis. They don't know the alphabet. They can't open up and read it. And the Ba'al Shem Tov said, but they can hum a tune. And this too is davening. He found a value in everyone. And when we talk about midos, that's a warmth. That's an acceptance of everybody on their own level. He was a holy man who could go out and speak to men, women, children, educated, uneducated, rich, poor, royalty, common, Jew, non-Jew, and relate to them and to help them. Many non-Jews came to the Ba'al Shem Tov. And, but things have changed over the generations, and today there's a criticism of rebbes who speak to women, of rebbes who speak to the uneducated, and they're losing sight of where the Ba'al Shem Tov started. But we're talking about midos, we're talking about warmth, we're talking about relationships, we're talking about a non-judgmental approach, which wasn't the norm in those days.
We're walking towards the South Borg River now in Mezritch, and this is really pretty close to the synagogue of the Ba'al Shem Tov. And behind me is this old castle that actually dates from around the time that the Ba'al Shem Tov was here. It's about 350 years old, I believe. And there's so many stories about the Ba'al Shem Tov coming even in the middle of the winter to come to the river to immerse in a mikveh a ritual kind of immersion, something he probably did every single day. Ritual purity was a big part of, and still is a big part of Hasidic Judaism. And it's entirely possible that this piece of the river that we're about to walk to now is where he came. And the stories are that he would actually break the ice off the top of the water to go into it. It's a very beautiful river. This, I believe, is the synagogue of the Abder Rav, who is buried by the Ba'al Shem Tov, Rabbi the Ohev Yisrael, as he was known, and Rabbi Avraham Yehoshua Heschel, Abraham Joshua Heschel of Abt. So let's see if it really is his synagogue. Yeah, all the doors are locked. And you can see inside that they're definitely in the process of reconstructing it. Come, you can peek in through the window and maybe see. It looks like they're going to be doing it in a similar style to the Ba'al Shem Tov synagogue there.
Not just anybody could have come and set up shop in the Ba'al Shem Tov's backyard, so to speak. It took a master of great depth and power, like the Abder, who was not only a tremendous scholar, but who also looked on others with deep compassion, as his distant descendant, Susannah Heschel, daughter of the famous Abraham Joshua Heschel, was able to describe for us.
And he said, when someone comes and they pour out their troubles, I open my heart, and their troubles make a scar in my heart. And when I go to pray, I open my heart to God and I say, look at all these scars. Now, I just think what it is to be a person who listens in that way, and what a gift to be able to talk to someone who listens like that. And you know, everybody knows, when you talk to someone, you know just how far you can open up to the person, because you can tell how much they're listening and in what way. And that's what, to me, is so central about Hasidism and what's such an important heritage.
In Mezritch, we were really fortunate to meet and talk with Rabbi Israel Gabbai, who was responsible for the effort to restore the graves of the Hasidic Masters, building most of the ohels that we've been visiting all over Ukraine, including that of the Ba'al Shem Tov. We also asked Yuri, our driver and guide, about how Rabbi Israel Gabbai and his team came to locate some of these graves.
This Gabbai Meir, Israel Meir, they begin to travel in deal all around the Ukraine. They have a special plan where is a grave, where is the tzaddikim. And for this place, he come here, they build community, you know, convenience, build a house, built some hotels, built the Gabbai Meir make a very big deal for this Hasidim for traveling. I know we traveling a lot. I know at least 55 places around of Ukraine for tzaddikim. For this place Gabbai built like this, you know, this hotel Gabbai built, because it was just cemetery, you know, just cemetery, few stones. We're looking for with this knife, with something tools to look. Where's the place? It's difficult. It was just cemetery, nothing, you know. So some place was just hole. And we found some special men who use, you know, like extra sense, you know. He used some special tools and say, tzaddikim here.
Wow.
You know, because no plan, just a cemetery. You know, it was miracle. But maybe the tzaddik show him, tell him, it's here.
We're told that the tzaddik lives even in death. That one part goes up tachas kisei hakavod to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, God Himself. One part stays by the kever, and the other part is the connection, goes back and forth. And that's why we go to pray, to daven at Kivrei Tzaddikim, the graves of the Tzaddikim, because we do believe that they can intercede on our behalf, that they have a connection that we haven't been fortunate enough to achieve in our own lives. And so there are times when you can go and you can feel that spirit. There are other times when you can't. What you'll experience depends upon lots of different things, but my bracha would be to you that you should experience a fulfillment and a hatzlocha, a strength and a chazaka, chizuk, to continue your work and to bring these concepts to greater Klal Yisrael, people of Israel.
Top of the door here it says Ma Nora Hamakom Hazeh. How awesome is this place? And it really is an awesome place. And on the front of the door it says Makom Kodesh, a holy place. Na lishmoa kedushat hamakom. Please keep the sanctity of this place. So this is it. This is where the Ba'al Shem Tov is buried. Po nifta, here lies Rabbi Israel Ba'al Shem Tov HaKodesh, the holy Ba'al Shem Tov. I can really feel the holiness of this place. There's a lot of really powerful energy here. I feel like whatever the historical truth might be about this man, he has opened my heart in different ways and given me space for a different kind of Judaism, a different kind of Jewish experience. And I just have so many images in my imagination, in my heart, of just him in the forest dancing, and just what he represents for me and for so many Jewish people of all denominations and persuasions, and it feels like an amazing moment. I have in my hand two special notes and prayers that have been handed to me to leave in this place, and I see it seems like there's just people just put them at the side of the grave, so I'm going to put them there. And $1 bill folded in a special way with the letters Bet Shin Tet on them, Ba'al Shem Tov, and a silver dollar from my teacher Rabbi Zalman. So I'm going to put both of these in the tzedakah here. There are so many nigonim, so many melodies that are attributed to the Besh, to the Ba'al Shem Tov, but the one that I have been taught as being the Besh nigun is this one. Ya na 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 ya 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 ni na 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 yini nai 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 Yini nai 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 nai. Our journey is coming full circle, and it's really been an amazing journey. I feel like it's a kind of a modern day Hasidic journey in itself, with our coach driver Yuri taking us into places that we weren't even expecting to go, places we never knew existed, and meeting a bunch of extraordinary figures, some of whom have existed in the realm of my imagination and the imagination of the Jewish people for hundreds of years. So I wondered if being in the place where the stories took place, the physical landscape as opposed to the spiritual landscape, might actually take away, but actually it's added, I feel, in extraordinary ways. I feel that there's something about seeing the names in Hebrew on tombstones in these places, some of which are tiny little villages and some of which are very beautiful Ukrainian countryside, has somehow given them a more living context rather than a more dead context. It's fascinating seeing the reactions of some of our non-Jewish guides, our driver Yuri, who shared with us that he feels something when he comes to these places. He's been coming to these places for a long time. Maybe there really is a power, a deep spiritual power that they have, that something of their real quality, something of their soul does indeed remain in the places where they're buried. And perhaps those sparks of holiness that exist there are really available to us. Maybe we don't have to come to the physical places as we've done on this pilgrimage, but maybe there really is something that continues to live in these holy men, these holy, holy men of the Jewish tradition, the Hasidim, the tzaddikim, the pious and the righteous ones, going back for the last 300 and something years. But in the end it was Yuri, our trusty coachman, who really summed up the spirit of our modern pilgrimage and put it all in perspective.
Of course, I believe that saint people make good for everybody. I think it's for everybody. Maybe it be time when all religions come together.
Yeah, maybe a time when all
it be when Mashiach come again. When Mashiach come, all religions come together.
Yeah. Nice. Very nice.
Okay, l'chaim. L'chaim.
Beautiful.
Every religion is a vital organ of the planet. And every religion nowadays needs re-enchantment.